Good evening and welcome to the November 4th, 2009 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We have a quorum present, so I'll call the meeting to order at this time. First item on tonight's agenda is to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of October 21st, 2009. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll declare them approved as submitted. The next portion of our agenda pertains to public hearings. We have 4 items under public hearings tonight, the first of which is a zoning request located along Old Lascassas Highway, Rocky Lane, and Gunnarsson Avenue for approximately 1.12 acres to be rezoned from RM16 to commercial local, the City of Murfreesboro's applicant. Good evening. How are you, Ms.
I'm good. Thanks for asking. Good evening, Planning Commission members. First public hearing we have scheduled this evening is to consider rezoning of approximately 1.112 acres located just south of Rocky Lane, north of Greenland Drive, across from MTSU, west of Old Lascassas Road, and east of Gunnarsson Avenue, from its current RM16 zone to local commercial district, CL. The property is just south of some new apartment complexes that are being built on the corner of Rocky Lane and Old Lascassas Road called North Campus Apartments. To the south of the study area, on the corner of Old Lascassas Road and Greenland Road, is a convenience market, and on the other corner of Gunnarsson Avenue and Greenland Drive is a bookstore. You may recall that last month during our public hearing for the property identified in orange on the map, a neighboring property owner, Ms. Hazel Bolden, stood up during the public hearing and asked the Planning Commission to consider zoning this entire block CL, local commercial district, as opposed to just zoning this one parcel CL. Planning Commission, you directed me to do some research and put this on the agenda, and to consider it for this rezoning request. The property, or the study area, consists of 3 separate parcels. These 3 parcels have 4 structures on them, and they're all single-family residential structures. The current zone, multifamily residential district, permits single-family residential structures as well as apartments. If it were rezoned to CL, local commercial district, the current uses would be a permitted use, or single-family residential dwelling units would be a permitted use. However, the existing mobile home would still be a non-conforming use that was lawfully established. Let's see. We are using new technology now. So if you want to direct people who are watching TV, and also Planning Commission, if you want to look at the TVs, you can see that I've included in your agenda materials and on the television an ortho photograph of the area. I've shown the 4 structures that are requesting to be zoned CL. I've also taken photos of all 4 structures. The property that's located at 915 Old Lascassas Road is on the corner of Rocky Lane and Old Lascassas Road. This is a photograph of it, and you can see it's a single-family structure. If you continue down Rocky Lane, there is at 1406 Rocky Lane is a single-wide mobile home. Keep going. We'll continue driving down Rocky Lane. And on the corner of Gunnarsson Avenue and Rocky Lane is another single-family house, as you can see on the TV. There we go. And then this is the last structure that's located at 906 Gunnarsson Avenue. The existing structures would require some improvements if they were to be converted to commercial uses. The staff would expect that they would need to comply with our minimum parking requirements and landscape requirements and other things that we typically see on a site plan and an ordinance. But if they wanted to continue to be utilized as single-family residential dwelling units, that would be fine. We would require no change. The property, though, we have scheduled this for a public hearing tonight to consider zoning it local commercial district. It's been advertised in the Murfreesboro Post, and if you have any questions about this property, either before or after the public hearing, staff will be glad to answer them for you. Otherwise, we'll be ready to answer any questions you have after the public hearing.
Okay. Any questions at this time? Okay. Before I open the public hearing, I'll briefly go over our rules that we conduct our public hearings by. When we open the public hearing, you'll be invited to come forward to speak at the microphone. Please come to the microphone and give your name and address. Keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes, if you would, please. And also make all questions and comments to the Planning Commission itself. If you do have questions, the staff will make note of your questions. We'll try to get them answered at the conclusion of the public hearing. All that being said, I'll ask anybody to come forward to speak that'd like to speak. Not everybody at once, please.
Where's the mic?
Nobody cares to speak on this item? Okay. In that case, I'll close the public hearing. Any questions or comments from members of the Planning Commission? Mr. Adelite, do you have any comments?
No, sir. I think Ms. Ely covered the subject very well. I will point out that with the reconstruction of Old Las Casas Road, that we have probably a new opportunity on this road that didn't exist just a couple of years ago, that with the old condition of the street, it probably wasn't as conducive. I will tell you that I've had some inquiries about commercial for some other lots in this area. I predict that in the future we'll probably entertain some requests, possibly for the property diagonally across the street, including the old house that was once on consideration before you. Possibly some of the parcels to the north, south of Brown Drive. They've been, I guess, some of them have been scraped clean and almost grown back up with weeds a couple of times this summer. But I would expect that we're going to see some visioning on the part of property owners about how to better fit the future. So I can tell you, if we weren't looking at it now, we'll be looking at it in the future.
Hearing none, Chairman Lamb, I recommend approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second
motion. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Excuse me. The next item on the agenda, I'm going to declare a conflict of interest on for myself. One of the agents in my company represents this developer, so potential conflict of interest there. So I'm going to step down from the chair for this discussion, will not participate in the discussion or the voting on this matter, and I'll turn the chair over at this time to Vice Chairman Young. Mr. Young.
Ms. Ely?
Thank you very much. Our second public hearing this evening is to consider an amendment for the Aurora Place portion of the Sunset Ridge Plan Development. In 2004, the Planning Commission City Council originally approved a zoning request to PRD, Planned Residential District, for property located north of Joby Jackson Parkway and west of Manchester Pike. The applicant is coming before you today to request for you to amend a 6.96-acre portion of this overall development plan. Currently, Aurora Place condominium is one of the condominium portions of this development, and it consists of a maximum of 78 two-story condominium units, which range between 1,100 and 2,000 square feet. Presently, the plan requires the condos to have a minimum of 65% masonry, which would include brick, stone, or stucco. Each unit is required to have shadow line dimensional shingles and fescue sodded yards. Also, currently, each unit must have an 18-foot deep concrete driveway and an attached garage with carriage-style garage doors. The applicant would like to make some changes to the existing PRD zone, thus going through the rezoning process. I'd like to introduce in just a moment Mr. Paul Cross, who will introduce these changes to you and go through them and outline them individually. Included in your agenda materials is a program book that has been resubmitted by the applicant. You may recall that at our last meeting, there were 3 changes which he committed to making. I did check the book to make sure those changes were made, and they were. The first was that to clarify the book, to show that a 3-rail wooden plank fence will be installed along the backs of the townhomes backing up to Joby Jackson Parkway. The second change, which he said he would make and did make, was that he revised the architectural renderings in the program book to be exactly like those that were approved in 2004 with no changes. And the third change was that the applicant committed at the meeting to installing foundation plantings along the sides of the units facing Ridge Drive, and that has also been included in the program book. I'll go ahead and let Mr. Cross come up and present this item to you, and afterwards staff may have comments. The Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing, though, to consider rezoning or amending this PRD zoning request. Mr. Cross?
Thank you, Ms. Ely. Chairman Young, members of the Planning Commission, thank you for entertaining this request. What we're doing here is we're correcting some problems and as well as correcting some errors that were in some planning documents that were submitted in 2004. Underscoring all of this is that we are not changing the appearance of anything from the original submission that was made relative to the architectural exteriors of the buildings. We're not modifying the square footage of the units. All of that is to be the same, and we're actually adding a couple of things as we've corrected some errors. There are basically 5 requests. The first has to do with a townhome unit, which townhome units 32 through 36. And I should tell you that this development was sold in 2006, and the Hastings companies had to take it back over, having not started any of the structures in this piece of Sunset Ridge. 3 buildings totaling 15 units were built by the owners who subsequently relinquished the property. So we are now getting ready. We've started one building out there and have discovered that there's some problems resultant from the placement of one of the buildings, and that would be units 32 through 36. That building backs up to the single-family detached portion of the subdivision, and there's a 20-foot drainage easement between the single-family detached and the townhome units 32 through 36, and the other units which follow that line all the way through Phase 2 and Phase 1. The problem is that the building pad was extended too far and encroached into the drainage easement. The original plan called for a 6-foot privacy fence and a row of trees on 12-foot centers to be there as a buffer between the townhome units and single-family detached. It is now not possible to get the trees and the fence in without the trees being within the drainage easement and creating other problems. So the first request that we're asking is for the concept plan to be amended to allow us to move the fence behind units 32 through 36 forward to the back of the patios on the existing buildings and forego the planting of the trees as was originally specified. There's just no way that plant material can survive in that situation. So that's correcting a problem that we inherited. Along with that, we realized that problem is going to extend the entire length of the row, the 3 other buildings, which will be in Phase 1 and Phase 2 that back up to the Everbright Point Section 1 phase. So to correct that problem, we're asking the Planning Commission to allow us to build 3 buildings that will have townhouses with no garages. That enables us to shorten the depth of the buildings. In our original plan, every unit was to have a garage. This enables us to shorten the depth of the buildings and to come onto the pad and prepare a base that will enable us to put the privacy fence and the trees as originally designed in the balance of this area and creating an appropriate buffer between the single-family detached homes and the townhouses. The third request is in Phase 1. You'll note that the buildings in Phase 1 on your plan are 10 and 11 plexes. That we, in Phase 2, those buildings were separated as a result of some fire safety concerns. And we initially did that when they started work in Phase 2. We think that is a better way to build units as opposed to having 10 or 11 in one case in a row. We're asking the Planning Commission for permission to separate those buildings because it's safer and it should not have any adverse impact on the development, and especially in terms of the looks of it. The fourth request is we want to solve an existing problem with parking that we see in all of the townhouse developments that we have. We have traditionally built driveways that were wide enough for 1 car and deep enough for 2. And we've learned by experience that people will not park cars too deep. So we would like to amend the footprint, the site plan on these units to allow for driveways that would be 18 feet deep and I believe it's 20 feet wide enough to park 2 cars side by side. It will result in some loss of green space, but it does take care of the ongoing problem that we have in other developments where we have people who just will not park behind one another and don't want to walk to the auxiliary parking that's available, so they wind up creating problems for the fire department and their neighbors by parking on the streets. So, and then the final request is to clarify, to correct 2 mistakes on the original landscape plan. The original landscape plan showed a 6-foot privacy fence along both sides of Ridge Drive. And if you look at the old plan, if you have it, you see that there's landscaping, fairly significant landscaping, that's behind that fence that was intended to be seen by people who come down Ridge Drive. That was simply a mistake. It also shows that privacy fence extending along the back sides of the units that back up to Joe B. Jackson. That was never intended to be that way, but it somehow got onto the plan. We would like to eliminate that fence. There would be no fencing on the sides that face Ridge Drive. And the privacy fence along the back of the units facing Joe B. that are back up to Joe B. Jackson, there would be a 3-rail wooden plank fence that would be put along there to enhance the landscape there behind the berm. And that's the substance of the changes.
Mr. Chairman, can I clarify one thing, Mr. Cross? On the privacy fence, when you're saying you're going to take that out along both sides of Ridge Drive and on the Joe B. Jackson side, and then there will be the 3-rail fence?
Yes.
On Joe B. Jackson?
On Joe B. Jackson only.
On Ridge, not up and down Ridge Drive?
Right. No, there's additional landscaping that is designed and was originally planned for Ridge Drive. There were trees that were put in originally, and a lot of them died. Mm-hmm. We'll be replacing the lost trees and then finishing the landscaping plan this fall.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Cross? We may call you back up, Mr. Cross, if there's more questions. All right, we're going to open the public hearing. If you'd like to come and speak against this matter, please come forward and identify yourself, and we'll open the public hearing now. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this matter? I see no takers, so we'll close the public hearing. Mr. Adelot?
Yes, sir. Mr. Young and members of the Planning Commission, this is a matter that the applicants have been visiting with me for several months, and they've been working towards getting an application ready to come before you. I don't think, as I've worked with them to prepare this application, I don't think that any of the things they're asking for really violates the plan. It violates the wording of the program book and therefore requires an amendment. For instance, the front parking without a garage, because the original plan had required garages. The plan was unfortunately specific about the privacy fence on at least one illustration. I said, well, let's just go ahead and fix that. So let's go ahead and correct errors. So we bundled several things together. It took the opportunity where there were some things that weren't clear. That probably, some of them individually could have been done at a staff level. But because of the opportunity to take care of the big item, which is the no garage issue, I wanted to just go ahead and bring it before the Planning Commission as a plan amendment. As I say, I don't believe any of this violates the integrity of the plan. Certainly if it did, I think we'd have a different discussion, but I feel pretty good about what they're asking for. And I want to also point out that, excuse me, as time goes by, we may have to revisit many of the plan developments we have as we find out the little problems that may have built up because of the change in the economy. In passage of time, we may just have to entertain these kind of amendments to help things get back on track. I'll be glad to answer
I
questions.
was just going to say, we've got lots of planned developments all over the city, and sometimes we don't get a second look to correct errors that were made, like we had the opportunity on this one. So this is a good thing.
I think correcting these and working these problems out is a good thing for the neighborhood and for, well, basically for the whole thing. And it's also just incidental to having planned developments. When you've got planned developments, and as many as we've got, we're going to see some of them coming back occasionally for amendments. That's just inherent with the nature of that type of zoning.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, if there are no questions, I would make a motion to approve the amendment request as submitted.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Lamb.
Thank you, Mr. Young. The next public hearing will be concerning a zoning request for approximately 2.92 acres to be rezoned from RS-15 to commercial highway located along Veterans Parkway and Franklin Road, the city of Murfreesboro's applicant. Ms. Ely?
Thank you again. This third public hearing is to consider rezoning approximately 2.96 acres from its current PCD, Planned Commercial District Zone, to CH, Highway Commercial District. The property consists of 4 parcels, and there are 3 single-family houses on these 4 parcels. It's along the western side of Veterans Parkway, which we formerly known as Beasley Road, and it's north of Franklin Road, or Highway 96. You may look at this property and think that it's familiar to you, and the reason that is because earlier this year you did look at this property, you did recommend annexation for it as a council, and you did recommend approval of the property owner's request to zone it PCD, Planned Commercial District. The applicant submitted a pattern book with the request to zone it PCD, but upon looking closer at that pattern book, it's been determined by staff that it was just too vague and doesn't qualify for how our zoning ordinance describes a planned development. Therefore, staff is bringing this back to you, telling you that it doesn't qualify for a PCD, and we have advertised it to be zoned possibly for CH Highway Commercial District. It'll require some discussion on your behalf to see if that is a zone that you feel is appropriate for this area. It is along a major highway and a newly rebuilt Veterans Parkway, which was just rebuilt by TDOT and finished this past summer. Staff can offer any additional comments to any questions you may have regarding this request. You should conduct a public hearing to consider rezoning the property from PCD to CH, and after the public hearing you have questions, we'll be able to answer them at that time as well.
Okay. Any questions from Ms. Ely at this time?
Just wait for the public hearing.
All right. I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. We're doing well on this tonight. Nobody? Okay. Nobody comes forward. We'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Young.
Mr. Ely, Ms. Ely, Mr. Alott, refresh my memory on the Salem Pike land use study.
Well, I'll be glad to, but since this area is in the Blackman study area, maybe it would be more relevant to talk about it.
I did say the wrong thing, didn't I?
The next one will be in the Salem Pike Land Use Study. And I didn't mean to embarrass
Let's
you.
substitute that for the right study for the right location. How's that?
The Blackman Land Use Study actually recommended that these type of commercial or other major intersections, that there be commercial nodes established, and that a commercial area here would be certainly appropriate in accordance with that plan. The Blackman Land Use Study offered a couple of different ways to implement the commercial zoning. Of course, one was with the traditional zoning, that being commercial highway or commercial fringe, and in fact it identified those as 2 possible zones for these type of areas. Or as an alternative, it also identified that a planned commercial development route would be another appropriate way. The Blackman Land Use Study was done about a little bit over 10 years ago now. We were working on it. And, of course, at that time we didn't have any authority or experience with design review, and we didn't have many good examples of good design at that time. Since that time, of course, we've begun to see a recognition on the part of local developers that they, in order to be competitive, in order to begin to meet the aspirations of the community, that they need to step it up. And that's sort of where this application began to go a little bit haywire. The applicants came to me back in the spring, talked about annexation and zoning. They wanted to know what the city wanted. We wanted good quality development. They wanted to assure that good quality development was delivered. They didn't have a specific plan. They offered to do a plan development with a reference to the Gateway Design Overlay District regulations, that's what they wanted. They wanted future users to be meeting that standard. We talked about a basic plan. They submitted a basic plan. In hindsight, we have found that the basic plan just doesn't quite what it meets, what is necessary. And the big problem being, when you have a speculative plan development application, you don't have a specific plan that somebody is ready to implement. And in the absence of a specific plan that somebody is ready to implement, our city attorney has advised us that that's not appropriate. So actually, I approached the applicant and said, asked that they consider allowing us to rezone it to a traditional zoning classification, with the expectation that in the future we'll be coming back to the Plan Commission with some recommendations to enhance our site plan review provisions to allow us to be moving all development in our community closer towards the GDO standard. At our work study session last month when we discussed this, I outlined some of the type of amendments we'll be looking at. The draft of those are well underway. I expect to have those before the Plan Commission at our next meeting as a draft for you all to even maybe be ready to schedule a public hearing. At that meeting, you heard testimony from one local engineer who says that those type of standards, if it was something brand new, might be something to alarm him and his clients. But he said, quite frankly, we have prepared him and his clients for that already because we've been discussing these, and that seems to be the trend. And he was seemed to be very comfortable with seeing these type of amendments. So what the staff has done, and you'll notice that the staff is, the City of Murfreesboro is listed as the applicant. We've made this application to rezone the property to commercial highway. Now, we've advertised for commercial highway, and the real question to you is commercial highway appropriate, or would some commercial zoning classification of a lesser degree be more appropriate? And we're going to have the same discussion about the next application as well. Commercial fringe allows some, but not all the uses that are allowed in commercial highway. It may be equally appropriate. So you may want to ask some questions or consider that before you make a motion on this. Would commercial fringe or commercial highway be the most appropriate? Certainly, the commercial fringe will take care of the uses that were in the original program book for this under the Veterans Plaza Plan Development. The commercial highway would also be within the framework of the Blackman Land Use Study for this location. I'd be glad to answer your questions.
Ms. Jones.
Mr. Alott and Ms. Ely, I'm sure you told us, I know everything across Franklin Road is all RS-15 or county residential. The parcels that are directly around it, are these still residential parcels right now?
They're zoned R15 in Rutherford County.
Ms. Jones, those parcels are zoned R15, but I think they're what you might call parcels in transition.
Yeah.
When the state began to build the road, some of the property owners began to market their property or seek different ideas for the property. The properties across the street that would be on the east side of Veterans Parkway and on the north side of Highway 96, all but one of those had houses on them, and I think the houses have been removed. Some of the lots in the area of this property to the north and to the east have also had structures been removed. Some of those are now rental properties rather than owner-occupied. Even across the road, I've had inquiries about people on the south side of Highway 96 along the Veterans Parkway about commercialization. Of course, sanitary sewer is the big impediment there. They don't have sanitary sewer. The first inquiry, when a property is listed, the realtor contacts the office to find out about commercial zoning for it, and then we have discussions about utilities and such. My expectation is that with the major roadway, with the signalization of the intersection, the reconstruction of Moore's Lane into the Veterans Parkway that's pretty much underway now, we will be seeing a considerable change in the zoning and the land use. The property on the east side of Moreland Lane, South Highway 96, that's that long rectangular shape that you see, it's actually owned by a church. The north part of that, I think from about 250 feet from Highway 96, they reserved that on their site plan. We've approved a site plan for the church, but they reserved that area with the expectation that they'd like to maybe hold it for commercial use, because they view it as an opportunity that if they sold that for commercial, they would be able to help offset their debt on their church, quite frankly. Or at least have a valuable asset for the congregation if they have a need for it. So they are viewing it as commercial too. So almost all four corners are beginning to have that prospect.
But I would just like to say, just voice my personal opinion, that I absolutely do not believe it needs to be commercial highway. It at least needs to be commercial fringe, and it may need to be commercial local right now. I mean, we don't have any idea what we want to put on this parcel. We're taking away our PCD, GDO, everything that the reason we did it to begin with. And for the area the way it is right now, I know where we think it's going, but to just do commercial highway, I'm just totally against that. And I'd probably back it off pretty far at this point in time if we're just going with a regular zoning and no planned district at all. Just my opinion.
Any other comments?
Chairman Lamb, I tend to agree with Ms. Jones, and I think the same is going to hold true for the next item that we have on the agenda as well. I think commercial highway is a little much too free rein, given the surrounding properties, and probably the most restrictive of our commercial is what we need to look at on this and the next item.
Questions?
Mr. Young?
Mr. Aylott, if in the future, if the property owner has a specialized interest, a specialized project to go on this location or any other location, can they come back and have a PCD for that would suit their client's need for this?
Very, very possibly that could be the case. For instance, if it were to be zoned commercial fringe, but a use that's not permitted in the commercial fringe district were to come, and they were able to demonstrate that they could do a very good job with it, that they could make application as a planned commercial development, because by then they would have a specific plan with a specific use and the ability to make specific commitments and prepare a specific site plan. Do all the things that they were unable to do with the original application.
What permitted uses are there in commercial fringe that are not included in commercial local that you would deem appropriate for this location?
Okay, commercial local and commercial fringe have one major distinction that's a little bit different. Commercial local, commercial local allows residential uses up to quadruplexes. Actually, a density that's similar to RM16. We talked about that tonight along Old Las Casas Highway. Residential uses, residential is not permitted in commercial fringe. So that's one big difference right off the top. Another difference between commercial fringe and commercial locally is that a commercial fringe will allow some small shopping centers. That would not be permitted in the commercial local. The commercial local allows for some neighborhood uses, and generally you want the commercial local to be on the more of a neighborhood area where it's going to create a neighborhood shop and an experience. A little bit smaller buildings are expected. Commercial fringe is intended to be along major highways, and in my thinking, it actually fits this property better. One of the things about commercial fringe that commercial local does not have is that in order to have a use that has a drive-up window, like a drive-up restaurant, which you can have in either district, but in the commercial fringe, we had the foresight to anticipate that a commercial fringe may be adjacent to a residential. So there's a prohibition of having a drive-up window within 200 feet of a residential use. There's a prohibition of having a gasoline sales within 250 feet of a residential use. So you don't have a gas station, for instance, right beside an existing residence. And you don't have I will always worry about is something like a midnight drive-through window. A couple of years ago, one of our fast food restaurants advertised the midnight drive-through. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun it sounded like a lot of fun to me when I was in college, and we'd go over there at midnight and order at the drive-through, but I'm sure that the neighbors were kind of upset by our loud radio. And when we were crafting the commercial fringe district, we wanted to cut that possibility out. We saw that that's the kind of thing that can be very obnoxious beside a residential use. That's some of the big differences. Some of the specific uses I'd need to pull out my zone ordinance and kind of do what I used to do and read through the list. But a lot of the uses are similar, but some of the more highway-oriented uses that are excluded from commercial fringe are allowed there, but they're given those limitations, like the drive-up windows and the gasoline sales.
Any other comments or questions before I call for a motion? If there's no other comments, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move for adoption of a commercial fringe zone,
I'll second it.
Staff comments?
according to all staff comments, to include all staff comments.
Did you second that,
I
Ms.
did.
Jones? Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. The final public hearing this evening is a zoning request for approximately 6.78 acres to be rezoned from PCD, Planned Commercial District, to a commercial highway located along south of Highway 99 and west of St. Andrews Drive, City of Murfreesboro. Once again, is the applicant. Ms. Ely.
Thank you very much. For the last time tonight, I will say that. Let me get my map here. Okay.
Be sure to get on the right one, Ms. Ely.
It is the right one. The correct map is on the screen. And this map shows an area colored orange. And this orange-colored area is located south of New Salem Highway, or Highway 99. And it's located west of St. Andrews Drive. The study area consists of a portion of two separate parcels for a total of 6.78 acres. And the request, or what you are studying tonight, is to rezone it from its current RS-15 single-family residential district to CH Highway Commercial District. This application this property would look familiar to you again for the very same reason the previous application looked familiar to you, is because the applicant came before you, submitted a very vague pattern book, which committed to meeting some standards, but wasn't specific enough to meet the standards that we require in our zoning ordinance for a planned development, specifically in this case a planned commercial district. So although you did recommend approval of that PCD zone, City Council did not move forward with that request because our legal staff suggested that we hold off on that because this property wouldn't, or this request doesn't quite fit what our zoning ordinance asks for. The zoning to the north is CF, which is Fringe Commercial District. There's a veterinary clinic just across the street. Also across the street is the location of a future Publix grocery store. To the east, the PUD zoned property is the Boxwood Plantation development. Currently, it is not developed, but it is zoned PUD, and it's a mixed-use sort of development with some commercial and some residential uses. The commercial uses are closer to this property, closer to St. Andrews Drive. To the south, the properties are zoned RS-12 and RS-15, and are the Belle Reeve subdivision, Belle Reeve and Belle Haven. The property, as I mentioned to you, the property owner would like to market this property for commercial use. Therefore, he'd like for you to consider zoning it for commercial purpose. We did advertise it to be zoned CH, which is Highway Commercial District. That's our most intensive commercial use. You alluded in our previous conversation for the last agenda item, but that may not be your desire. If it is, we have advertised it so you can zone it CH. However, if you'd like to reduce that to a CF zone or a CL zone, that would be something that you have the option to do. The Salem Pike Land Use Plan recommends that this area best suited if it was used commercially. The Planning Commission should consider the CH zone and engage in some more discussion and then come up with a recommendation for me to bring to City Council for this property. If you have any questions at this time or after the public hearing, I'll be glad to answer them for you, and Mr. Adelot would love to answer them for you.
I'm sure he will. Any questions before we open the public hearing?
Chairman, just one comment I wanted to make about this and the prior item as well. I assume the reason staff advertised both of these as commercial highway is just what Ms. Ely said, and that's because that's gives us the broadest latitude and discretion where we can scale back from. And our comments that we've made so far about that being, and I think the words I used were too much free rein, and Ms. Jones, the comments she made about needing to be a little less intensive, that sort of thing. I just want the public to realize that it's advertised that way so that we do have that latitude to be able to scale things back and gives us that range.
Yes, sir, Mr. Gidd, that is precisely the case. I view this as sort of a study. The Planning Commission is a studying body, and since there was not a specific request made by an applicant on these, I felt that we need to have the ability to study broad, recommend narrow, and we preserve that ability for you by advertising commercial highway in this instance, in both these instances.
Thank you, sir.
May I point out to you that I placed on your desks a letter from the owner of the veterinary clinic across the street, Dr. Robert Blaylock, and you may read that at any time, but I did promise him that I would pass out this letter to you and even mention on TV that he did write a letter. So it's there for you to read at whatever time you seem appropriate. Mr. Adelot is also passing something out.
Yep, just like we wrote it.
Thank you. Do you have a comment? Excuse me. Do you have a comment about this, Mr. Adelon?
I think Mr. Decker was going, Mr. Belt is going to make a comment about that when you open up the public hearing, and I'll just go ahead and hand it out.
Okay, well, we don't want to keep Mr. Decker / Belt waiting over here, so I will open up the public hearing and invite Mr. Decker Belt and anybody else to come forward that'd like to speak. Mr. Belt, welcome.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Wayne Belt. I live at 1410 Broadlands Drive in Murfreesboro. I own property very close in a very close proximity to the subject property that you're looking at tonight. I have prepared packets for you. Doesn't that sound good? I've prepared packets for you just to kind of have a little walk down memory lane of a refresher course of what's happened over the last 10 years as we did the Salem Pike study area when this property was being considered. I am here, by the way. Dr. Blaylock called me earlier, and Dan Decker this afternoon, 2750 Salem Road, 2786. Mr. Decker, my business partner, lives directly across the street in his residence, which has been there for 25 years, and Mr. Steve Simmons, who lives next door to Mr. Decker. So those three properties are all together, and then I own the property that's behind them, or Dan and I own that together. Just wanted to kind of remember, because this was my first time to ever go and visit land use programs, and it was very educational. But these are 6 pages that are just some things out of that land use study. If you would look with me for a moment at the first page, the goal 1 was to maintain openness of Salem Pike. And that was part of trying to keep that sense of openness. Down here I've highlighted under objectives was to cluster commercial uses within activity nodes as opposed to strip development. Number 2 under the goals was to provide a unified appearance for Salem Pike. It is the goal of the plan to provide a unified appearance in conjunction with Salem Pike serving as a gateway for Murfreesboro. If you turn to the next page, that's off page 33, this comments on ensuring the continuation of community participation in the further decision-making and implementation of this plan, and to ensure a fair and consistent process in the implementation of the plan. If you turn over on the next page on 4-3, there on the left side it addresses neighborhood commercial nodes, and on the right side it addresses the mixed-use limited land development. If you look at the last paragraph under that number 1 on the right side, it said uses along Salem Pike subject to adherence to scenic corridor building setback, pedestrian orientation, unified design, shared access, and parking and master plan approval. And then on the last page of the document, it once again is talking about the neighborhood commercial nodes, mixed-use retail, personal services, food services, offices, etc., of a neighborhood scale. With that in mind, the CH, and you've alluded to it on your one prior to this, is way too broad, in our opinion, to meet that. The last piece of paper you have is actually a color copy of the map that's out of the Salem use land map. This is compliments of R.J. Young. And so if you look, this was what was in the final approved plan of the Salem use plan. It's lovely, multicolored. But you see what's called St. Andrews, and then across the street, Kimbrough. You can see on those corner lots there where the Walgreens is located, Dr. Blaylock, and where Publix is going. And then across the street, it was on the McCullough property at that time. Those were actually considered as commercial fringe. If you look at the starting of the plan at Stones River and you go all the way down to where the plan ends, you'll find there's no CH zoning anywhere on this highway. So as a part of being consistent, we think commercial fringe would be appropriate for this. All of us would be in favor of that, but we think the CH could lend itself to too many other things that wouldn't keep that corridor pristine and looking like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Very good job. Would anybody else like to speak?
My name is Kyle Daniel. I live at 5665 East Overall Creek Road in Rockville, and I work at 2750 New Salem Road with Dr. Blaylock. And to revisit, when we came to 2750, all veterinary clinics were considered CH at the time, and you guys asked that it could not be zone CH, that veterinary clinics had to be changed to CF in order for us to sit on the property that we now sit on. And so it being CH would be out of step of what was decided 5 years ago when we moved there.
Good. Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Nobody? I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Gilley, you addressed this so eloquently a while ago. I think you can continue.
Chairman Lim, thank you. I think probably we can all agree that, as Mr. Belt said, that commercial fringe is probably the best route to go with this situation, to allow the owner to market his property in a commercial fashion, but also keep in step with the remaining properties in the area, and with Dr. Blaylock's office and Mr. Belt's property. With that, I would move that we recommend rezoning this to commercial fringe.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Gilley. That completes the public hearing portion of our agenda this evening. We have one item under the Gateway Design Overlay, that being Waterstone Office Park, Lot 5A, final design review for 36,474 square feet on 3.07 acres, zone light industrial and GDO 3, located along Williams Drive. Mark Permit Gateway LLC is the developer. Ms. Logan, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. It's good to see y'all tonight for this gateway item in our final design review. This item is located, or this site is located at the terminus of Williams Drive in the Waterstone development. As you'll recall, at our last meeting in October, we reviewed the initial design review for this project, and we have a rendering of the project that, if we want to go to screen, that we can show, that shows a primarily masonry building, indicative of the design of the gateway area. I think that staff, in combination with the applicants, worked diligently to try to bring a project that we feel is fitting for that area of our community. This will be a 3-story, primarily, again, masonry building with a canopy front. It will have stained concrete hardscape throughout. It will also have an employee seating area at the rear with a hedge, and this also sits adjacent to our City of Murfreesboro corporate headquarters site. Hopefully in the future we will have a corporate headquarters there, and the City of Murfreesboro owns that land and, of course, is actively marketing it. So, but we want to just have a building that really fits that area with 4-sided architecture. This building will have 4-sided architecture. It will have, essentially, has been designed to have a nice view shed from Medical Center Parkway, as well as our Gateway Island, as it sits in proximity to the Gateway Island, a large investment made by the City of Murfreesboro, as well as having identical elevations along the front and the rear, with the exception of the canopy, so that, again, as it sits at the end of the drive and you come in, you have a nice view shed, as well as a nice appearance to the corporate headquarters site. Staff has reviewed this site plan and is in good order. The majority of staff comments have been made. Their stormwater quality control plan has been reviewed by our environmental engineer and is in good order. And there are also pictures in your packet tonight of the proposed bioretention areas that show a gravel bottom in those areas with a formalized landscaping around it, with some natural plantings, and we feel comfortable with that type of bioretention planting in terms of there are some naturalized plantings in there, but it has a nice formalized edge, which is an important aesthetic quality of our gateway design districts. In addition, there will be, there's a picture in your packet of the proposed stained concrete. And no, it's an indoor area, but it's indicative of the type of stained concrete that will be used at some of the crosswalks and canopy areas. And this is a treated product throughout, so it's not just applied, the coloring process is not just applied at the top, but it's actually throughout the concrete. And I think that's something that you all have looked for. We would ask that, one of the things I think that we need to do, though, is ensure that we're using the same product throughout this development. We only have one other building built over there with our Centennial Pediatrics, so whatever the developer decides to use, he happens to also be one of the developers of the subdivision, that they use the continuation throughout so that we have a nice cohesiveness that kind of helps create that campus-like atmosphere that we're trying to achieve. Other than that, the site plan is in good order, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them for you. I brought the color board with me if you'd like to look at it again. But again, it's all masonry building in ephes cornice.
Any comments or questions on this request? And we have reviewed this at our previous work session in some detail, so if there's no comments or questions, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend approval subject to all staff comments.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries. That concludes the Gateway Design Overlay portion of the agenda. We had 3 items under plats and plans, but item B, Love's Travel Stop, and item C, Bella Vita Development Entrance Sign, have been withdrawn. So it just leaves us the one item A, which is Blackman Farms, Section 4, re-subdivision lots 296, 297, and 298, a re-subdivision plat for 3 lots on .55 acres located along Campfire Drive. Syntex Homes is the developer. Ms. Logan.
Yes, sir, thank you. This is just a re-subdivision to address some of the requirements located in the Blackman Farm Section 4 subdivision, currently one of our more active subdivisions in the city of Murfreesboro. The 3 lots that are in question had conditions related to the orientation of the garages that had to be modified as conditions on the plat, as well as a modification of the lot line between lots 296 and 297 to allow for a side entry garage on lot 297. This 3-lot subdivision is being brought before you tonight because under the state of Tennessee laws, anytime there's a subdivision amendment or any type of subdivision at all that entails more than 2 lots, it must be approved by the Planning Commission. But this plat is in good order.
Okay. Any questions or comments about this proposal? If not, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second. Motion is made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Logan.
Thank you all.
Mr. Adelot, staff reports and other business.
2 small ones. Number 1, education requirements. We're sneaking up on the end of the year, and if you have not got your required mandatory 4 hours of continuing education that will be applicable for Public Chapter 862, please contact Mr. Lewis. He'll fix you up with some education opportunities. I know most of you have gotten it, but in the event you hadn't, make an opportunity to call him. The next item is a matter that I want to discuss with you that actually may lead to an education opportunity. I received a letter from Mr. Stuart Johnson. He's our superintendent at the Stones River National Park. I'm going to read the first paragraph because he says better than I what he is on his mind. And that is, in light of recent and planned development in the vicinity of Stones River National Battlefield, we would like to invite you, your staff, and the Planning Commission to visit the park as a group to help all of us understand the challenges and opportunities we face in the coming years. So the letter goes on to talk about some of the things that are going on, but the first paragraph really sums it up well. He and I spoke on this, and I said that this is something I'd bring up with you. If we were to wait until January 1, we might be able to create it as an education opportunity to meet continuing ed requirements. If we do it this year, we could still do it, but some of us already got our education requirements and may not be in need of it. He says that if possible, he'd like to do it sometime early in the year or sometime this year. And I'd like to see what would be on your mind. The park is a very big part of our community. It's a big part of our heritage. It's a big part of our history. As stewards of the physical development of our community, you all have a role to play in it as well. And, you know, I think it's a good idea to have an opportunity to meet with them. They do have some really exciting things going on over there. They've got some changes in their entrances that they're looking at. They've looked at quite a bit of investment funding that we've received with the aid of our congressman to improve the park. So he's very proud of what he's got going on. He'd like for us to know about it, and he'd also like to work with us. Constantly, it seems like we have some issues bumping up against the park. Manson Pike recently, we talked about it. At the Gateway in general. So I told him we'd discuss it, and I was sure that you all would have an interest. It was just a matter of when.
I actually suggested this to Mr. Johnson, Mr. Stewart, what's his last name?
Johnson.
Yeah, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Backlund at the park. With what was going on in Manson Pike, they were concerned about commercial development encroaching upon the park. He brought up the view shed from the new trails that they have planned that will be closer to Manson Pike itself, or Wilkinson Pike. I was not aware of it, so I thought it would be a good opportunity if we all became more educated about exactly what the park had in plans out there. And so as we made decisions that would affect them coming down Wilkinson Pike there that comes closer to the park, we need to know exactly what's going to be going on over there and what their master plans entail. So, and also knew about the new entryway coming off Thompson Lane. So I don't think any of these items are imminent as far as occurring in the next few weeks or anything. So it might be appropriate to wait till some warm day in January or February when the buttercups are coming up. All of us go to the park one day and learn what's going on right here in our backyard.
Well, if we can set up for at least an hour, we can get an hour of education, but in 2 hours, we might be able to do it. Actually, they have some trained people who are good at making presentations, and it will be interesting, come what may. If we begin to look and maybe ease towards something in the second or third week of January, second or fourth week of January, would that seem to fit you? Maybe try to get it on a Wednesday, and maybe look at it sometime, give or take a little bit around lunch. We might be able to help by providing lunch to supplement the time, to be able to make it a little bit more easy for you to move from your employment to spend a little bit of time at this.
Okay. We don't need a motion or anything to this effect, I don't believe.
No, but I see nodding of heads, so it seems like that'd be the right way to go, and that seems like you'll be hearing some more on me on this subject, and I will confer with Mr. Johnson.
Anything else, Mr. Adlott?
That's all I have tonight.
That's all we have. We stand adjourned.